Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great community show. This is Veeam 100 Show episode number 12 for you, and we promise a super interesting discussion today. I am joined by two top technical experts when it comes to Veeam technology, Jochen, one of our Veeam 100 members, and Michael Kate, Veeam Field CTO in Product Strategy team. I am in Bucharest, Romania. Jochen is joining us from Germany and Michael from the UK. Where are you joining us from? Just let us know in the comments. And Michael, Jochen, long time no see. Just joking in here. It was great to see you both of you last week in Berlin. I hope you both had a good time. I heard really good feedback on that, so really curious to hear yours, but we are not here to talk about that today. But this is your first time being part of the Veeam 100 show, so welcome both of you. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm all good. Good to be here, Maddie. Excited to share some cloudy stories with the community. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Maddie, for the Thank you, Maddie, for the introduction. I'm also very good today. Actually, yeah, we all met last week in Berlin, and it was a great time, as you already said, at the Veeam 100 Summit. Always the highlight of the year in the Veeam community. And I'm excited to host together with you. Actually, I'm not hosting, participating in my first Veeam 100 show together with Mike.
Yeah, great stuff. And thank you for accepting my invite today. And since this is your first time for both of you at Veeam 100 show, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourselves to our audience?
Yeah, I can go. So yeah, Michael Cade, I'm a field CTO here. I work in the product strategy group or the strategy group, and my focus is all things cloud. So whether it be Kubernetes, public cloud, some of the new stuff around Veeam Data Cloud as well, but all things Veeam. I've been here for 9.5 years, so I've created quite a bit of content across the Veeam landscape now. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, for me, as you already said, my name is Jochen Seeger, and I'm sure it's hard to pronounce for some of my English-speaking friends, but I can't change my name, unfortunately. So I'm in the IT space for now about 17, 18 years. And all of this time, I was always in the backup space with systems integrator companies in Germany. So when I started out in my backup journey, I was working with another product. I was working with IBM Tivoli Storage Manager back then for 8.5, 9 years. After I switched to the Veeam technology, and this is now about since 8 years, I solely and only work with Veeam as a backup vendor. During that time, I also changed my employer, and I now work since almost 8 years for SVA. We're one of the biggest systems integrator companies in Germany, with about 3,500 people, I think, at the moment, all across Germany. And since about a year and a half, I am now also the technical team lead for our backup team in the southwest of Germany.
Thank you both for the introduction. That's really great. And since this is actually a community show and you both very involved with the community, I would like to ask you, what's your role in the Veeam community? How do you contribute, and what inspires you to be part of the community? Michael, you have participated in various shows at the Kubernetes Corner, at the Community Hub. You've been involved writing a bunch of posts as well. Jochen, you are a Veeam Vanguard for a while now. So yeah, that would be, I think, interesting for the audience to hear from both of you.
So I think from my perspective, obviously working for Veeam and working very closely with our community, whether it be our vanguards or legends, but our broader community, it's about, for me, community is about sharing and enabling, raising awareness of everything that we're doing, but equally, I'm a member of many communities as well. So it's about giving and taking and hearing some of that, the interesting art of the possible stuff out there in the world, getting that feedback and then looping that into whatever piece of content that could be. So that's I'm very much for the community across any, whether it's the Veeam community, but the wider technology community is a powerful thing. And I guess that's what drives to share these art of the possible bits of content, whether it be blogs, whether it be videos, whether it be demos, sessions at these events. But yeah, basically being able to up level other people around you is my kind of definition of why I'm involved in all aspects of community.
Yeah, as you said, Maddie, I'm a member of the Veeam Vanguard family, let's say, Veeam Vanguard community since 2022. So now I'm in my third year in the community. I actually got into the community by a fun little project which was called Beat the Gostev. It was a speed challenge back then, like who could have the fastest backup speed, which fortunately I won, and it was quite an experience and also quite a journey, also a journey like we're talking today, to get to those numbers. And since I was able to present this challenge, first of all in smaller community calls, and then I was even able to be on stage at Veeam On. So this is how I got involved in the community. And since I'm working with a lot of customers, I really enjoy sharing real life customer experiences with the community and letting people know what might be possible out there in real life projects.
Thank you both for your answers. Very powerful. And I do hope that your answers are going to inspire others in our audience to join us at the Community Hub and maybe in the future be part of the Veeam 100. Who knows? But now, without further ado, let's dive into the subject and discuss the topic you guys prepared for us today. And if anyone watching today has questions for us at any point during this presentation, please type them in the comments and we'll make sure to get them answered. So Jochen, Michael, stage is all yours.
Sure. Then I guess I'll just start, Michael, if that's okay with you. The title is a bit mysterious, I admit that, the evolution of a hybrid cloud data freedom. So just to clarify what's behind this title. It's actually a real life customer story of mine. It's a customer who I'm working with since, as we will see, since 4 years now. So we started with 2020 when the customer approached us and said he needs some help with some Veeam stuff, and he has a plan which he wants to get to life but doesn't know how. So that's when I first came in contact with the environment. So the basic environment as we found it was not done by us, it was already in place, partly by the customer itself, partly by other system integrators, and he had a problem he wanted to address. And that's like the story of the presentation, how this environment, this global, or at least, almost global environment changed over the course of 4 years and how it changed together with Veeam. So all the features which you guys introduced during those 4 years, how we integrated what was helpful to us into this environment and to get it to the point where it is now. So if it's okay, I would just start with the first slide for you. Okay, so this is like the whole concept of the slides. It's just a visual approach. I don't like slides with a lot of text. I prefer to talk about it and to show what was happening. So when we got the environment, at the beginning, there were several separate VBR servers, all-in-one servers, all across the world. So the main site of the customer is in Germany, of course, since we are a German systems integrator, it's near Nuremberg. But there were also smaller sites, very small sites in Italy, Portugal, Bulgaria, everywhere across Europe. And he also had sites in China, in Vietnam, and like in this area of the world. So there was no real 3-to-1 rule. There were all small scattered environments. Also, those environments partly came from bought companies. So the company grew through the acquisition of other companies, and they had backup admins and backup environments already in place. So they didn't put a global SLA rule or anything, no global management over it. It was just small islands. There was no real 3-to-1 rule, as I said, so every site had small backups, sometimes on low-cost NAS solutions, like you find a lot of times in those smaller environments. Yeah, and what the customer already did, since you see in the timeline, we're now in January 2020, and the customer was still on version 9.5. Although in that time period, version 10 was already available, but he was, as we got it at 9.5. What he already had, he had a scale-up backup repository in the main side, and he used the capacity tier function back then. But back then it was only possible to move older backup files. And since he has a strong connection with Azure and all his cloud strategy was supposed to be in Azure, he used Azure Blob Storage for that. So he already moved backup files from the main location out to older backup files out to Blob Storage. And what he really wanted to do is use Azure as a disaster recovery data center. So because he only had one main site, and he was afraid that due to natural disasters, the site would go down. So he wanted to be able to spin up his backed up environment, his backed up production environment as Azure VMs. So, and that's where he got stuck a little bit, and he asked us for help. Mike, do you have any questions?
Yeah, there's one thing to say there. Like, so on the map, it looks as if that Azure Blob or the bucket storage is over in North America. I think it's fair to say that the customer wasn't shipping data across the Atlantic. It's just an image.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were using a storage area in Europe. It was just for the visualization, and this picture is getting bigger over the slides, so I had to move around my symbols a little bit. So actually, no, the data was not lying in North America. It was in European Azure data center.
Just another question on that. So obviously, there's a load of VBR servers scattered around, all in one servers. Were they all physical boxes? Were they virtual machines? Or was there a mix? What did that look like?
Most of the time there were physical boxes. It was just most of the time there were small servers like 1U or 2U servers, partly with disks integrated into the system, partly, as I said, with some low-cost NAS systems in place. Just like Veeam is very easy to install, and this is a good thing. And sometimes it's also a bad thing because everybody can install it and doesn't really have to follow the best practices because it will work either way. It doesn't matter how you design it. And in that case, it was the basic so-called next finish installation. We all know about this. And there was no security in place. There were domain joint systems and so on, no backup copies. But it was working for the customer at the time, but it just wasn't ideal.
So there was a question in from the audience as well about what motivated them not to have 3-2-1, and I think it probably goes to the fact that they didn't know what the 3-2-1 was versus going against that idea. Just for those listening in, the 3-2-1 rule being 3 copies of your data on 2 different media types and one of them being offsite. Is that fair to say they just didn't know about that, or they didn't have the understanding of that?
In the main site, actually, the 3-2-1 rule was in place because back then they also had tape attached to their system, and also the offloading to the cloud storage, but it wasn't a copy. It's not a real 3-2-1. But as I said, a lot of the smaller locations were bought up companies which already had a very small IT department. I mean, there were like sometimes 5 to 15 VMs on those sites. It was very small, and it was we just need a backup, just get it done, install Veeam, and you're done with it. But nobody at that site really cared about 3-to-1 rules and hardening environments and so on and so on.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened after you got involved? This is where it gets good.
So we take this approach step by step now. First of all, what we did on a Veeam side was we consolidated the VBR role where it was possible. So we had the main site in Germany have the only location to be just with a VBR, and in all the smaller locations, we either used only proxy VMs and local repositories with then backup copies between the sites. So wherever possible, we copied the data from the robo locations back over to the main site. Some of those robo sites really needed a hardware refresh because the servers were Stone Age old at some points. And we could not get all of the VBR servers consolidated at that point because some countries had restrictions. At some countries, or to some locations we had back then, we had very low bandwidth and not very stable connection. So if we would have just put a proxy there and the VBR would have lost connection, then we would have a problem at that site. So we did still have some locations with the VBR server, but also the licenses were scattered all over the world. So we installed a enterprise manager, added all the remaining VBR servers to that enterprise manager, just for the sake of being able to have one big license file, and every VBR server just gets the license file from there. At the same point, as you may remember, I said the customer wanted to be able to have a cloud disaster recovery. So, but then we quickly found out, hey, even if we restore your VMs on Azure, you wouldn't be able to work with it because this whole network environment was not set up for his end users to be able to work with Azure VMs. He could have run, or he already ran some VMs, but strictly for IT purposes, and they had the tools for that. But all the rest of his stuff would not. It would work in Azure, but nobody would be able to work with it. So that's why at the same time frame almost, a colleague of mine who is an Azure consultant, he did a network redesign. He did the firewall connections from the on-sites to the Azure environment and so on. And this was like a two-stage process. I did the consolidation of the Veeam environment, and he did the preparation of the Azure environment. Yeah. So any questions from you, Mike, up to that point?
Yeah, I guess a key thing that unlocked the ability to do this was, so we had the capacity tier, we had that way back. It was the capacity tier that allowed us to just drip our older backups into a bucket and prolong or be more storage efficient. And then along came the capacity tier and the copy mode, which was basically a backup copy. So that means that we're going to take what's in that primary production 714 30-day type repository, and we're going to copy that out into the Azure blob. So I think that opens up the door to a lot of cool things that we're going to get to now. But yeah, all good. Let's crack on.
All right. So after the Azure environment was prepared, what we did is we placed a standby VBR server in Azure. This VM is most of the time, 99% of the time, this is powered off, so it doesn't cost the customer any money. And also, since this VBR server is only used in the disaster case and only used for restores, it will never do a backup. It's not designed for that. It doesn't even need a license. So as you know, Veeam never charges for restoring, only for backups. So this VBR server is just sitting there being turned off. The only thing we did to it, we installed the VBR server and we connected the blob storage where the customer did his capacity tier move to, also as a repository to this VBR server. So the plan was if the main site goes down, we power up the VBR server, we rescan the blob storage to get the most recent retention points in the database, and then we are able to use the function direct restore to Microsoft Azure from Veeam to restore locally backed vSphere VMs as Azure VMs. So this was the plan which we started out. And on the next slide, I will just talk a little bit about. Actually, I should have used that slide for the last few sentences. That would have made it a lot more, lot more visually appealing. Yeah. So the standby VBR server, as you see, it's normally paused and it's accessing the same Azure blob storage as the on-premise system. And in the case of a destruction of the main site on-premise, we can use the direct restore to Azure VM. Yeah, this is, and I know this is now a few years old, and I know if anybody is watching who is more capable of Azure network design, I know that this might be outdated, but this was just the design back in the day. Because one thing we had to overcome was we wanted to test it. I mean, every Veeam customer knows the virtual lab, it knows Sure Backup and the way it works. And we wanted to be able to test the restores and see if it's even possible that the applications work in cloud together with all the other stuff. And this is quite challenging because we cannot do a instant restore with virtual lab in Azure per se with that over that way. So that's why my colleague designed this failover test network here. And this was a great thing because when we restored the Azure VMs, or when we did the test restore, we just selected in what subnet, what network security group, and so on we want to restore the VMs. And every time it was a test, we just restored them to the test network. And then it was kind of like a virtual lab. We could restore application servers, database servers, whatever into there, and just see if they would work together. To be able to get into that test network is not so easy as it is with a virtual lab, which just do the IP masquerading. So the customer had to use a special VPN client to connect into there, because if we would have connected those networks, then we would have double IP addresses in the network. Yeah, so this was the Azure design at that point. And this was not done by me. This was done by much smarter people than me who knows how to Azure network. Okay, any questions up to this point?
No, I think we get through to the rest of it, and then I have got some questions if we get through.
All right, then we'll go on. So this was the main part. This was basically why the customer in the first place wanted to include us and solve this problem. Actually, we did have smaller hiccups. I mean, everybody who does a project of this size over this course of years would be lying if he said he'd never ran into any problems. Back then, when we did the capacity tier with the VBR, there is a limitation that only one VBR server is allowed to access the blob storage at the same time. There was a time when we actually accidentally had both VBR servers accessing it. So the standby VBR server was just reading it. I didn't think much of it because he was just reading, and the on-premise VBR server was pushing data. And then we had a small corruption in the metadata, and the backup chains couldn't be filled from the on-premise server. But support quickly helped us with that. After that, we knew about this, so every time we wanted to test the restores and we had to spin up the on-premise, the Azure VBR server, I had to go into the on-premise VBR and just disable the capacity tiering. So I made sure that no data is being sent to the cloud at that point until I'm done with the tests on-premise. Yeah. All right, I'll go on. So what happened next? The next step was actually, as some of us know, Azure Blob Storage is not the least expensive storage in the world to put backup data in, mostly because the egress costs and so on, and the transaction costs which Azure needs. So that's why we did a cloud switch. So we switched the provider over to Wasabi, mainly due to cost reasons. And also what we could add then was immutability. Back in the day, now it's a different story, but back in the day, Azure Blob was not able to generate the immutability. So that's why we switched over to the F3 protocol and added immutable buckets. We kept all the functionality the same. The only thing we had to change is on the Cloud VBR server, we had to change the repository over to Wasabi. So, but other than that, nothing has changed on that side. Now, on that picture, it looks like we are only using one Wasabi region on one location. This is actually not true because we had global sites. We will see that on the next slide a little bit better when you used it more. For every location, we used the speed estimator from Wasabi itself, where we could say, look, I'm coming from, let's say, Vietnam, and I'm looking for the fastest connection to any cloud Wasabi cloud storage location. And we put them all over the world. Wherever it was the fastest possible connection, there we put the data. So this is also a great thing, just flexible. You put it wherever you need to and where it fits your business need, and not where some software limitation or whatever forces you to. Yeah. Also, at that point, I'm not talking about this, but we also added Veeam backup for O365. In that now it's M365, so I know, but back then it was Office 365. I'm ancient. Yeah, this was also done on Wasabi Cloud Storage, but we do not talk about this at the moment. All right. Any remarks up until that point, Mike?
So no, I think that's a valid reason to move, right? You've implemented the 3-2-1. You've got them from object storage into immutable object storage. As you mentioned, Veeam later then came out with the ability to, or Azure then later came out with the ability to store immutable blobs or immutable versions of their data as well. But Wasabi was a tried and tested option to go to. So all makes sense. You're obviously adding the value, bringing that 3-2-1 to the customer at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And also at that point in that version, so around the V10, V11 area, we could also finally, in Germany, everybody was waiting for that feature. We could add to the move feature, we could add the copy feature in the capacity tier. So now we also had the most recent retention points copied out to the cloud and being able to, if needed. Luckily, we didn't need it so far, but the most recent retention points were out and secured. What was still in the on-premise world, we were still not as secure as we could have been. So there were still Windows systems. There was not a lot of immutability going on. In all of the locations where we were able to change hardware, there we started the discussion that, hey, we also need protection for your on-premise environments. But this was a challenging thing. Also, in the main side, where like the most important data is, they didn't want to invest into new hardware. So we had the hardware, which it was because their strategy was to go into Azure more and more and not investing in on-premise infrastructure. So it wasn't easy to just switch out because it was all Windows based. It was all in place. At that point in time, it would have been a challenge to just switch over, but we'll come to this later.
Cool. Yeah, I've got a question around it. So from the image, so a question from the audience was, there's just one Azure link. No, I think just for simplification of the diagram, I think you could probably have multiple routes into different Azure regions but obviously that would look a mess on this picture. So yeah, on there, it wasn't just one Azure link. It was multiple VBRs going in, or multiple proxies at least going into one Azure region, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah. Just I'm keeping the slides as simple as possible. As I said, if anybody needs very deep dive into that topic, just approach me and we can talk about this. But those slides just get an overview and get everyone interested in the topic.
So a big thing that you touched on, so we're moving more towards that security model. We're looking more towards that data security where we're storing that data. What was next? So we're in mid 2021 at this point. Where did we go? Where do we go next?
Yeah, now we make quite a big jump time-wise. We jump to early 2023. Now all the small backup locations, and this was now possible with the switch to V12, and we were able to use object storage as a primary repository. Now we were able to just say, hey, all the small environments with the 5 VMs, the 10 VMs, there was some locations which required a local repository, but most of them it wasn't necessary to have local backups. So we just said, hey, let's do a direct backup up to Wasabi. The bandwidth to the internet was okay for that part. So we just we kicked out all the old remaining hardware which was on premise for the backups, and we just did virtual proxy systems, and we did direct to S3 backup directly to Wasabi, which was then directly immutable, of course, because all of the buckets, each location got its own bucket, of course, was directly immutable, and we did not keep any backup data where possible on premise. There were still some locations, as I said, some were a little bit bigger, where we said, okay, if something happens there are critical systems, we need a fast restore, then we will keep local repositories. And also there are some locations which have restrictions to what cloud you can use and you can't use. So we had to get a little bit creative on that side. Yeah. And also what helped us a lot, or what helped me a lot, was switching over from capacity tier to backup copy jobs. I think backup copy jobs to S3 are much more flexible than the capacity tier, because as you know, in the capacity tier, just everything you put into the repository gets uploaded, and if I want to pause it for some reason, it's always a hassle because I have to remove the check mark, and when I put the check mark back in, it has to resync and so on. A backup copy job is just a backup copy job. You can always pause it, disable it. You can decide which VMs I want to back up, which I don't want to back up. So this was, and also for troubleshooting reasons, for reading logs, if something goes wrong, the backup copy jobs are much more easy to troubleshoot than the capacity tier. So we switched out all the capacity tier stuff and only switched over to the backup copy jobs, which actually, coming back to your first question, this actually also solved the problem of the two VBR servers accessing the same blob storage. I don't try it recently, so I'm still a little bit afraid of letting both VBR servers run to it, but the synchronization time of the Azure VBR server got much smaller. So back then, when I had to rescan the repositories, it was a couple of hours to get all the new backup data in. Now it runs for I would say 15 to 20 minutes max, and it has all the backup data in there, and it's just much faster and much more convenient.
Yeah, I guess to your point around backup copy jobs is not that, and we do this with capacity tier as well, but that segregation away from the main backup job and being able to have the per VM chains as well would be a much faster way about understanding what is going where, and then you've got your grandfather, father, son type approach to tier off to say, right, this site needs to keep X amount of data for X amount of time. Just a little bit more creativity when it comes to scheduling, I think, is probably the option. A lot of that is around, like, from a Veeam perspective, is you can do a lot of things different ways, and it all comes down to that freedom of choice, I guess, is the key part there. But cool. So we're everything's in an immutable bucket at this point. We've moved over to a bit more of a granular way about being able to store a longer retention of our backup jobs, and then we've taken the management layer out of each of the many of the robo sites, and we've just put endless virtual proxies or proxies in place. So then where are we now?
So now we jump to now. So this is the last slide for that, because this is how we are now. This is now because the last piece of the puzzle, which I already mentioned, was securing the on-premise world. So now every location which still has local repositories is now switched over to a hardened Linux repository. Even the main site, we were able to switch over the the Windows repository to a hardened Linux repository. We moved out the VBR role to a VM, and there is one thing which really amazed me, because when we did the switch, we did it like we copied all the actual retention points over, and then I formatted the whole system and changed the operating system from Windows to Linux. It changed from REFS to XFS, and I made a completely new repository, and I had to do a new active full backup. So everything from the on-premise world was changed. And then I started the backup copy job again, up to the object storage, and I was sure that I had to upload all of the data again, because just so much changed, and I didn't. I only had the changed objects from the last backup being uploaded to the cloud. I really did not think that this would be possible, because I changed everything below it, but it just went on like it was an incremental backup. Yeah. Actually, Sure Backup was always in place at the customer, but he really did not use it that much. So we reconfigured it, and he really uses it right now. This is also a feature which helped us a lot, where you were able in the Sure Backup jobs to say, hey, I just throw all my backup jobs in there, just pick 10 random VMs, do 3 at a time, just run it every day. Because up until then, it was kind of a hassle for the customers to configure the Sure Backup jobs and to think about how do I get a randomization in there. And a lot of them just didn't bother back then. But now it's really easy. Just do one Sure Backup job, test every day, test a little bit of your environment, just to be sure that you're good to go.
Yeah, let's just touch on that a second, because Sure Backup, we've had Sure Backup at Veeam for a very long time. Before I even joined, it was one of the features that I was like, that's really cool stuff. But basically, Sure Backup is the ability to, or it began the ability to spin up your environment like in a sandbox, isolated environment, and be able to test against the VM, the app, or the VM, the OS, and the app, and then send an automated report against that. So if you've got 10, 100 machines, you spin them up from the backup repository, and you get a big thumbs up if they're all good. Actually, 12.2 and more recent releases of Veeam, we now don't have to you can still do that. You can still spin up the actual machine, but we can do some validation against the backup file itself to make sure that the contents of that are good. We've added the ability to do things like secure scanning against that, and some really interesting stuff. So awesome to hear that someone's using it. Every Veeam customer has access to Sure Backup, and I think more should use it, regardless of where they're storing their data. But yeah,
Totally
sorry,
agree.
I have to harp on about that a bit.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. I mean, every time when I do a pre-sales presentation, it's a big selling point. But after that, unfortunately, the customers in the last few years, tended to not use it as much as they should.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What a journey with this project, Jochen. It's been a few years now, right? Quite complex, and it seems like it's still work on progress. Who knows? Maybe next year you're gonna come with the rest of it, with more info, more updates. So let's see. Looking forward to it. I think it was a great topic. I think it was very interesting. I saw like audience very strong on LinkedIn. And I hope everyone got something, to learn from your experience today. If so, let us know in the comments what you think, guys, if it was good, if you want Jochen to come back with more updates. And yeah, thank you both, Michael and Jochen. It was really awesome to have you both at the Veeam 100 show today. Any final thoughts on your side?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next year's show on the how this has progressed even further.
We can do a progression of this, or we pick up any other exciting projects. There are still a few to choose from.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And you guys, you love talking about all these things. So looking forward to have you back. Thank you once again, and thank you all for watching us today. I wish everyone a great rest of the day, and don't forget, we'll see you all in December with a new Veeam 100 Show episode.